Civic society are people who are doing civic activism, are engaged in civic initiatives in the interests of the society, or some groups or deprived groups, for instance, or even groups that that want to do some creative work. And these could be associations, just associations of free citizens, or organizations like ours, which is registered at the Ministry of Justice in Abkhazia. And the important thing is that these organizations work without interference from the government. Our legislature in Abkhazia allows us, and our constitution gives us the right to have freedom of associations. And on the basis of this right, and also on the basis of the laws that we have that covering the activities of non-governmental or not-for-profit organizations. So we have the right to work without the direct interference from the government. And the other important thing is we are outside arbitrary regulation from the state. We still have organizations like Ashana, like Karaz, who are doing humanitarian assistance to vulnerable groups. There is a movement of mothers. Everybody knows this organization. They are helping people who died in the war. Yes, the families of people who died in the war and the families of the missing persons. So this is still on the agenda. And unfortunately, there are families that really need such assistance still. 25 years after the end of the war, and 25 years, we had a big celebration of 25 years, and in our country we still have children who don't attend schools. I think one of the also achievements, I will talk about achievements later, but I think it's important that the human rights work has become more focused. We now have organizations in which we have human rights protection public centers to which people can come and with their complaints, and lawyers, and not always lawyers, but mostly lawyers, of course, because they know all the legal issues. They either give them legal advice or accompany them. They can accompany them when they go to to see some officials or to the court, and so on and so forth. We spent some time on working out the strategy for working on the repatriation issues. As citizens of Abkhazia, of course, we were interested in these issues being resolved more effectively. And there was a time when we organized a special seminar. We brought together the stakeholders, people from the repatriants, people from the repatriation committee, from the MPs. We try to work on the strategy, not only how to help these people to adjust in the new environment, but also how to work with other people who want to repatriate, how to work with people who don't want to come and live in Abkhazia, but who want to have very permanent contacts with Abkhazia, who want to invest into business probably. There are organizations that are working with the minorities, ethnic minorities, because we are a multi-ethnic society. Like, for instance, the Association of Women of Abkhazia, they had a very interesting project. They asked me to conduct some seminars for them. That's why I know some of their projects. They tried to include minorities and even we prepared a policy paper on minority issues and how they see, whether they think that our policies are inclusive or not, and what they would want to change, and so on and so forth. They're also working on gender issues and empowering women. And as I already mentioned, the Association of Disabled are working on promoting independent life for people with disabilities and accessibility of space. The other sphere where we were working was public oversight. when we as citizens exercise control over what the government is doing. And I think one of the examples of this oversight was the establishment of the League of Voters for Fair Elections. In 2003, an association of NGOs established the League of Voters, and were first contested the presidential elections when we had more than one candidate for the first time. It was very contested, it was a very difficult period, and at that time we were monitoring elections as NGOs. And not only NGOs, when we announced that we are establishing the League of Voters and we're going to make sure that the elections were fair, a lot of people joined our league. Pensioners, students, they were not part of NGOs. They just came and said, we want to help you to monitor elections. And we had a lot of, at that time, we had a lot of seminars. We trained people, not only from the league, we also approached different candidates and said, please, you will have people who will be monitoring elections for you. Send your people to us, we will train them equally, everybody. So we tried to help everybody, because our interest was not to help particular candidate, our interest was to make sure that the elections are fair and the results are accepted by all the parties. Later we did other things, like for instance we monitored how the healthcare institutions are providing information, because there are some government programs for people who are liable to certain kinds of treatments, free of charge, for instance. There are some programs for cancer, some other things, and people don't have information. So, and we monitor all the healthcare institutions to see if there is information available, so that to pressure them to make this information clear. So these kind of things. The youth house, for instance, they are doing a lot with the younger people. They also work with teachers, teachers of English, for instance, and they are working with teachers to train them in new methods of teaching, interactive methods, produce textbooks, and so on and so forth. Our organization, we work on civic education mostly. Our colleague, she is now the ombudsperson, Asida Shakrul, but when she used to work in our organization, she prepared a manual for teachers on civic education. And we went throughout Abkhazia, we worked with more than 250 teachers of history. We worked with them, we trained them so that they could use this manual in their schools. Unfortunately, civic education hasn't become an important part of the education school. I think it should, and not only, a lot of people think that it should become a part of the school curriculum, and also at the university, but in schools particularly. Abkhaz language, also we supported some projects. For instance, there is a local fund, foundation, which is called Amshram, and I'm on the board of that organization also, apart from CHP. And we have funded through Amshram a lot of projects, textbooks for children, for those who know who don't know the language, for those who know very little, and so on and so forth. But also, for a number of years, for instance, we produced a newspaper, journal, Civil Society magazine it was called. And for the first time in Abkhazia, that was before the law on the language was adopted, we decided that half of the magazine will be in Russian, half of it will be in English. In Abkhazian, sorry, in Abkhazian. Thus, that was the way we wanted to promote the Abkhaz language. One important area is advocating democratic norms and procedures, not only through human rights work that we are doing, because when you are doing human rights, you are dealing with violations. The violations on the part of the people from in the government, and that sometimes is because the official is neglecting his duties and violating the law, or sometimes because the law is not very good and you have to change the law. And by the way, as NGOs, we drafted several laws and then lobbied and through some people, through some MPs, we were able to come to the point when these laws were adopted. One such law is access to information, the right of people to access to information, very important law. The other law was drafted by the Association of Women, which is on the equal rights of men and women. But there were many other laws to which either we proposed amendments or we participated in the drafting of the laws. For instance, on the ombudsperson. The President's administration, they sent us the draft law and asked for our opinion. So we made a lot of amendments to that law and they were accepted. There are not many young people in all the NGOs, I would say. But the good news is the young people are now starting their own organizations, which is not bad. There is, though, as I said, I think one of our achievements was that we have now reached a place when we are looking not only at individual problems, but also at systemic problems. But there are still areas when there is lack of this systemic approach. You take a fire brigade, you go and you have to put down the fire, that's clear. But you have to have protection mechanisms. Otherwise, you will not have enough fire brigades, to run all over the place. So you have to think about more systemic approaches. When there were fewer organizations, it was easier for us to communicate. There were no social media at that time, so we couldn't, go to Facebook and exchange information. We had a different style of communication. Every Friday, we had meetings in the Association of People with Disabilities, and we sat there, had coffee, tea, talked, shared information, and decided what we were doing together. But we were very few at that time. Now there are many organizations, and it's true, sometimes I don't know what some organizations are doing, and they don't know what we are doing. That there are very few funding institutions, and the funds are very limited. Again, talking about organizations in provinces, there was a time when nobody funded them. They funded the Sukhum-based organizations. What we did was, we agreed as a NGO club, we said, let's include them into our project proposals. And we did. So we agreed, for instance, our organizations will include Kvarchal, the youth house will include Achamchira, somebody else will include Gagra, and that's how we tried to help each other.